So in the first pillar, we look into image lazy loading. Image lazy loading is really a technique of deferring the bulk of the images being loaded on the page until after the initial page load. We only really need this to happen on the very first visit for that particular user, because on the second visit, hopefully we've got our public cache headers set for our image assets, and the user is able to load this quite quickly out of their local cache instead of downloading those images every single time. So the demo I followed was a progressive and image lazy loading blog from Sitecore Sam, which you can see over here. Links will be provided in the video description. But this really runs you through how to use the Progressively library, which you can see on the screen at the moment from GitHub, and how we can use that in SXA with data attributes in order to get a blurred image to show on the page first, that then loads or progressively loads the full size image into the screen. The result of the blur, of which is having the blurred image, is that we have a drastically reduced image size initially, and then deferring the greater image load until the JavaScript kicks in and switches the larger image around in its place. So the code that I came up with to do that on the front end basically puts progressively in line, and this saves us from having to download another external JavaScript file. And then I go through images detecting whether or not the user has visited the page or not with a cookie. If it's their first pass, then we use progressively to do some polling, some delays, and then use progressively to load it. If it's on the second pass and the user has a cookie available, then we basically get the JavaScript to quickly go through and switch the image attribute over to the source attribute to give the effect of basically no image lazy loading on that second pass. So just to point out, I also found an issue on Sitecore 9.3 SXA. This was already noted by another person who had the same issue, whereby the image attribute was being rendered as a Sitecore ID and not an image URL. I provided a full answer and fix on that particular ticket. Unfortunately, it's got no votes yet, but this is the solution that I have running in this demo. So fairly confident that that will work if you wanted to plug in this demonstration yourself. That full code is actually available on the ASIC blog samples, which I'll also put in the description of the video. Okay, so let's jump over to the VM and just see how this has all been set up. So just to point out that under Habitat Home, I've uploaded that blurred image. I've actually used the same blurred image for all images on the page at this point, including the navigation. You can use multiple blurred images or a blurred image per image that might match a particular image on the page if you like. Up to you. That will increase the initial payload of the page. An example of how Sitecore Sam's blog has been implemented can be seen in Habitat. Inside Habitat, if we have a look at the presentation services and rendering variants, we have some promotions that are used on the homepage, which actually live in the global, and they're shared by the Habitat home there. So let's just jump into those. Where are those? Okay, so image left progressive. As per the blog, we set up a figure, and then we have a image inside that which looks for our blurred image field. we use the data progressive attribute, which is required by progressively, and then render the normal image into that data attribute. So the blurred image goes first, and then the data attribute contains the URL of the promo icon. So for each image on the Habitat Home, I've actually created variants that will load every single image with the blurred image first, followed by the progressively format with the data attribute to then load the secondary bigger image later on by progressively. As you can see on the promos themselves, which live in data, promos, so essentially every promotion now inherits our blurred image template. And the blurred image template I created down inside of templates, feature, experience accelerator, and progressive image. So we've got our blurred image field, and I've also set on the standard values the blurred image. So a lot of the navigation items, the different promos on the page all inherit this progressive image template, and they get that off the standard value. To demonstrate how that image lazy loading looks on the page when you first load it, if I hit the refresh button there, as you can see, and granted this isn't perfect and some of the CSS is slightly out, but you get the point, is that all the images on the page are lazy loaded and will come in as you scroll down the page. And even the navigation items, which contain numerous images that are never seen at first anyway, these are all images, all lazy loaded as well. Even the carousel images, all lazy loaded. Okay, so what's the impact of that lazy loading? So we can see this by hitting the refresh button, looking at our images in the network. So the image payload size normally is 2.6 megabytes. Just to point out that we have public cache headers all set up for our images, which is going to be necessary for Google and Lighthouse to really give us the scores we want. If I want to see the lazy loading effects again, I clear out those cookies that I'm using to track the second page load and then hit refresh again, and hopefully we'll be able to see just how small we get with minimal images at first. So it was really quick, but you see how the images slowly start to stream in, and that's all happening after the fact. So let's just see if we can see how some more images come in as we scroll down the page. There we go, from 2.2 to 2.3, 2.5. Now onto the PageSpeed Insights tool. And if you recall back to our baselining video, we got a baseline score of between 35 and 40 out of 100. So what sort of improvement are we now looking at achieving from image lazy loading? And so 55 out of 100 on the mobile. Desktop will obviously be pretty high because it's a lot easier to achieve good desktop scores. And then what have we improved upon when it comes to recommendations? So, okay, for that load, the server was actually responding pretty slowly, but if we run it again, we may get a better server response time depending on when we hit it. 57 out of 100. Okay, and that time the server responded within a more meaningful sort of response time for time to first byte. So looking at the opportunities, the ones that actually dropped out were serve images in next-gen formats. So because we're only showing Google on the instant when the page loads is pretty much a single JPEG, no longer considers that you have a whole lot of images straight up that need or impact that particular criteria. So it's dropped that out. It's also dropped off the properly sized images because you're now deferring the bulk of the load of those images until afterwards. I will put out that the other page speed pillars we're using do target these. So serve images in next-gen formats, another pillar that we mentioned earlier around image compression, that will also address that. So we'll see that one drop off another pillar as well. And then properly sized images in the responsive image pillar. This one will also be taken care of. So there is some crossover between some of these pillars. Prior to starting this video off, I have run through a few more of those page load tests, and you can see the median for coming in for the image lazy loading seems to be probably around the 55 out of 100 mark. So the baseline score was previously 40 out of 100. If we say it's going to be 55 out of 100, we're seeing a 15-point increase coming across the line from doing image lazy loading. That's it for the image lazy loading pillar.